Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. Let's begin the discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 10 important articles for a detailed and comprehensive coverage so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. Now, before we start, I have an important announcement. Now you can enroll for Unacademy's online classes at just 19,999, and you also stand a chance to get up to 12 months of free extension. So to avail this special offer, you have to enter the code IAS English. So those interested can click on the link provided in the video description below. And if you want the PDF of this session, please join our official Telegram channel by scanning the QR code on your screen. After the session ends, we will be sharing the PDF over here. So let's get started and look at the first article. On page number 6, there's an article that refers to the employment situation in India. This article is very important for Indian economy. It helps you understand the job crisis that the Indian youth are facing and how going forward India has a great opportunity to ensure that it can power its dream of achieving a Viksit Bharat, becoming a developed nation by addressing the job crisis. Because according to studies, the next 25 years are absolutely critical for India. Recently, a report was brought out by the CII, the Confederation of Indian Industry, which is an association of the Indian industry. According to this report, over the next 25 years, India will be adding 133 million people into the working age population. Now, please make a note of this data. It can be important for prelims as well, and you can use this data in your mains answers. Over the next 25 years, India will be adding 133 million people into the working age group, which is between 15 to 65 years. This is nothing but our demographic dividend. This is the opportunity that lies ahead for India. If you compare the total global workforce that will be added in the next 25 years, 18% of the total incremental workforce will come from India alone. I'll repeat this point. Over the next 25 years, the new workers who will enter the global workforce, 18% of them will be Indians. Now, this is a once in a century or maybe once in several centuries kind of an opportunity for India. So, what can India do to leverage the workforce which is going to enter the market? Because currently, India is struggling to provide adequate jobs, fulfilling jobs to the existing working age population. So, what will we do in the next 25 years when 133 million people more will be added to the workforce? So, this opportunity could become our biggest challenge and weakness, which could even lead to the collapse of our economy and society. So, India right now is at a very critical juncture. India depends on what path we will take, how India will bring out the right policies and initiatives to leverage this demographic dividend to power the rise of India to become a developed nation. So let's break down and understand the steps that need to be followed. Let's address the issues that are present one by going beyond the article. See, first and foremost, India needs to fix its college education system, right from reforming the curriculum to providing more practical skills to our college youth so that it is of direct practical experience. That era is gone where you could just imbibe theoretical knowledge and push the graduates into the working market. But the problem is they're not employable. They lack the practical experience and the skills to work in the real world. Most companies and organizations, this is where they find the biggest challenge when it comes to India's youth. Though India produces one of the largest numbers of engineers and professionals and graduates in the world. The problem is majority of them are not employable. They don't have the basic skills that are required. Be it the specialized skills or be it the soft skills, they are lacking in both. So reforming the college curriculum, ensuring that our young graduates are job ready, they are prepared for the industry so that they can even start out their own ventures through entrepreneurship initiatives. That should be the focus of the government. This has to be the starting step. Ensure that the right skills are imparted to the youth, the right opportunities are opened up at the college level. Ensure there are adequate higher education opportunities which can provide for greater specialization. This is the first and foremost step, the most important step to ensure that we harness the demographic dividend of India. Then, apart from reforming the college education, the second important step is skilling. It's not just about what is taught in colleges. There might be several million youth in our country who may not go through mainstream education, who may not be able to get a college degree or graduate out of colleges. So, what about them? They would comprise the larger part of our working age population. So, there is a need to bring the informal sector and formalize this sector with better training, with capacity building initiatives. See, right now, there are several schemes and programs run by the central government and the state governments. We have the Skill India initiative, for example. There is a dedicated ministry for skill development today. But the writers believe that these efforts are still not sufficient to cater to the demand. If you have to upskill millions of youth, then you need more proactive engagement. There needs to be vocational programs focused on specific sectors. This would be the third step. Identify those specific sectors which are labor oriented, which are labor intensive, and imbibe those skills. Provide vocational training, capacity building programs in those specific areas. For example, textiles. For example, tourism, hospitality. These are sectors which can have a great appetite for large scale employment, where millions can be employed. So identify these priority sectors and ensure that training and capacity building and upskilling is largely concentrated on these targeted sectors. Then it is equally important to ensure that we bring in technology from AI to robotics. Ensure the training is provided at the grassroots level. Country's youth, they should not miss out on this technological wave, the technological disruption that the world is seeing. So AI tools should not be restricted or limited to the urban population, to the well educated population. This should be mainstreamed to the grassroots level and ensure that training programs incorporate the latest technology as well, so that youth across the country, even in rural pockets, even in smaller cities, can acquire the right skills so that they can become employable. So, this has to be the fifth step, addressing the regional and social disparities. Ensure that it's not just your large metro cities which will make this transition. Focus on the smaller tier 2, tier 3 cities. Focus on the rural pockets. Ensure that the social and regional disparities are addressed, because this will ensure that the benefits will be equally distributed, ensuring greater equity, greater inclusion. So, equity and inclusive development has to be the priority when it comes to job creation in the coming years and coming decades. Because please note, in the year 2043, India will be hitting its peak demographic dividend. Meaning, after 2043, we will start seeing a decline in the working age population. This is the peak moment. So, before that, that is in the next, let's say, 5 or 8 years, India will have to put in place these basic steps, the foundation, so that we can reap the benefits of this demographic dividend. We should also ensure that we tackle the problems of mobility and migration. Now, if you look at the last 3 decades of India's growth story, large scale migration has taken place from rural agrarian belt towards the urban centers. There are few specific states from where working population has moved to certain specific cities and a few particular regions. For example, southern and western parts of India and maybe the Delhi NCR region. These are the only pockets which have really seen tremendous growth. Whereas all the other regions, they have migrated out and sought opportunities in these parts where industrialization has taken place. Now, this is a major discrepancy which has led to large scale disparities in the country. So, addressing the disparity, ensuring that even the other states and cities and towns develop equally, creating employment opportunities is very, very critical. So, one sector that we should leverage is the gig economy. This is step number 7. See, right now, one of the mass employer is the MSME sector, your micro, small, medium enterprises. They account for more than 25 crore jobs today, as far as Indian economy is concerned. So MSME sector has been a job generating sector for millions of people in the country, especially at the lower sections of the society. So another sector which can do the same is your gig economy, be it the delivery apps and the various new age applications where the gig workers are hired. This is something which can transform our economy. According to estimates right now, close to around 500,000 at least are employed in the gig economy of India. This can easily increase multiple times. Estimates indicate up to 9 crore people can be employed just in the gig economy. So it's important to ensure that gig workers get the right wages, that they get the right social security. Right now, this is largely missing, be it the delivery executives of food delivery apps and e-commerce apps, or the cab drivers, for example. The gig workers are right now underpaid, usually exploited as well. They usually don't have social security and long-term stability as well. So there needs to be policies in place, legislations in place at the state level, at the national level, to ensure that the gig workers are protected, and we need to streamline and formalize this key sector of the economy. This can be a major employment generator. Then apart from this, there can be focus upon creating a employment guarantee scheme which can act like a net, a safety net. We already have a rural employment guarantee scheme, which is your Manrega. So, on similar lines, an employment guarantee scheme focused on urban areas, because the unemployment crisis is very massive in urban areas. So, to address this, there can be an employment guarantee scheme which can act as a safety net to those who can't find jobs, to those who get laid off or get fired. So, there should be a safety net that the government creates. So, we need to ensure that the new labor codes which have been brought out, they are implemented as soon as possible. Right now, there is a lot of friction and resistance from the labor unions and from the from the workers as well to accept the new labor codes. It's high time that all the 4 labor codes are effectively implemented. It is equally important to ensure that labor issues are addressed with utmost priority. It could be the underpaid scenario that you see, where people are made to work more, whereas their wages don't match the work that they are doing. Ensuring that they are given adequate social security and long-term stability, financial stability. This is something that state has to ensure in coordination with the industry. So all these steps are essential and they have to be taken immediately in the next 5 to 8 years, so that when India adds the 133 million working age population over the next 25 years, the foundation would have been laid and then we can reap the benefits of our demographic dividend. Or else, if we fail to do this, then the other scenario is extremely alarming. It will not only cripple the economy, It will not only prevent India from becoming a Viksit Bharat, but it could lead to serious social challenges and social problems as well. So that is the key lesson we take away from this article. Based on this, take up this practice question. Let's discuss the answer writing approach as well so you can improve your answer writing skills. The question says, treating employment as a national priority is critical to achieve the vision of a Viksit Bharat by 2047. So that is the opening statement which has been given. The question says that the government should consider solving the employment related issues and problems as a national priority. Just like defense, just like economic growth, employment creation should become a national priority in order to become a Viksit Bharat by 2047. That is the statement. Next, but India still lacks a unified national framework that addresses the issue of employment and livelihoods. So, a second statement also has been given that India doesn't have a single unified national framework to deal with employment and livelihood related issues. Then comes the directive. Critically analyze these statements. So, how do you approach such a question? I mean, if you read this properly, there is no exact question which has been given. Rather, two statements have been given that analyzes the employment situation in the country, and you're asked to critically analyze these statements. So, it's not your regular conventional question. So, in the introduction, you can talk about either the employment crisis in India, if you're aware of some data regarding joblessness and the extent of unemployment, you can present that scenario as your introduction. Or the other option is to talk about India's demographic dividend. Again, using data, talk about the working age population in the country, how this is going to increase exponentially in the coming years and peak in the year 2043. So this data can be presented to talk about the opportunity that lies ahead, how this could become our biggest challenge as well. Then in the body, outline the vision of a Viksit Bharat. What does it mean to be a developed nation? How can India become a developed nation? And to achieve that goal, you need to secure jobs for your working age population. So create that link. That linkage is very important. The vision of Viksit Bharat, creation of jobs and employment. How do you connect these? So create that linkage and then provide the suggestions, provide the way forward. What can be done? How can the nation create so many jobs in the coming 2 to 3 decades? List out those 8 to 9 steps that we discussed one by one. Slightly elaborate on each step, starting from college education and reforms to skill development to introduction of better technology, addressing the key sectors, leveraging the gig economy, and ensuring the disparities are addressed, right? So list out each one of them and elaborate 2 to 3 points about each of these categories. And that basically completes your answer. Then finally, in the conclusion, right? Conclusion, you can keep it very simple. You can say that this demographic dividend that we are going to enjoy is both an opportunity and our biggest challenge. If we do these steps, then we will leverage the opportunity, we will realize our vision of becoming a developed nation, or else present the other scenario. If we lose out on this opportunity, this will become our biggest challenge, our biggest nightmare, as how it can derail our economic growth and how it can affect our social fabric as well. So that is the contrast you have to provide in the conclusion. What will happen if India doesn't do this? And what will happen if India manages to leverage the potential? So I think this will make for a well structured answer with proper appropriate linkages. If you're aware of any data from current affairs articles or any schemes and initiatives which is mentioned in current affairs, you can plug that into the answer to make it a more well rounded answer to this question. So I hope you make use of this discussion to practice your answer writing. Now let's look at the next article, page number 7. The article deals with disaster resilience. It's from the topic of disaster management. The writer is focused on India's progress towards achieving disaster risk reduction. Where does India stand with regard to achieving disaster risk reduction? See, disaster risk reduction is a global goal, a global target laid down under the Sendai framework. It is recognized under the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations as well. India has adopted the principles of the Sendai framework. We have incorporated this into our national disaster management policy and the national disaster management plan, and even the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda. The Prime Minister's 10-point agenda on disaster risk reduction that was brought out in 2016 is based on the Sendai principles to help India achieve the goals of the Sendai framework. So India has already incorporated those principles and goals and targets under the National Disaster Management Policy and Plan, which is brought out by the National Disaster Management Authority. And the Prime Minister's 10-point agenda on disaster risk reduction also incorporates these principles and guidelines. Now, who is responsible for achieving these goals and targets under disaster risk reduction? The nodal ministry is your MHA. The Ministry of Home Affairs is the nodal ministry for disaster management in the country. The nodal authority is the NDMA, the National Disaster Management Authority, which was established through the Disaster Management Act of 2005. So it's a statutory body. So these nodal institutions have this responsibility to focus on disaster risk reduction. Now, what do you mean by disaster risk reduction? Disaster risk, it arises when hazard, vulnerability, and exposure coincide. When these three exist at the same time, at the same place, the disaster risk is very, very high. Now, let's say, for example, the east coast of India. East coast of India faces a significant hazard. What is that hazard? Which is the hazard of, let's say, cyclones or tsunamis. East coast of India is very prone to it. So hazard is a potential state which can turn into a disaster. The possibility of occurrence of a cyclone or a tsunami that can strike the east coast of India represents the hazard condition. Vulnerability is when the region is vulnerable to the impact of the hazard. Let's say we have many coastal cities which are densely populated. That becomes a vulnerability when you have a high dense population right in the region where the hazard is present. Or let's say the infrastructure of that region is not prepared to deal with the impact of the disaster. That becomes a vulnerability. Let's say the region is not well developed. There is a lot of poverty in that region. That becomes a vulnerability of that region to cope with the impact of the disaster. So there can be different types of vulnerabilities. Physical vulnerability, geographical vulnerability, social vulnerability. So when hazard and vulnerability coincide, the risk of the disaster goes up. The impact a disaster can have in terms of loss of life, loss of property and infrastructure will increase exponentially. And if the region has a higher exposure to the impact of the disaster, when the three coincide together, your disaster risk will start shooting up. So vice versa is also true. You can manage the disaster risk by limiting the hazard, limiting the vulnerability, and limiting the exposure. Maybe you can't prevent a disaster like cyclone, but you can have better early warning systems and forecasting systems so that timely alerts, real-time alerts can be given and you can evacuate the people from the path of harm. So that way you're mitigating the impact, you're managing the hazard. You can't prevent some hazards, but you can at least mitigate the overall impact of it and try to reduce the damage and the loss caused by it. You can reduce the vulnerabilities. You can train the population, make them aware what to do during times of disaster. Provide all the resources to the community to help them cope with the impact of a disaster. Deploy disaster response forces, train them adequately, and also create the infrastructure needed. You can create natural buffers to withstand the impact of, let's say, cyclones and tsunamis. A coastal green cover, especially mangroves, can act as a natural buffer to reduce the impact. Or building these coastal walls, which can contain the coastal flooding, right? These are some examples. Then, to reduce vulnerability with regard to earthquakes, ensure building codes are enforced to make your infrastructure disaster resilient, to make it earthquake proof. So, such measures can be taken to tackle vulnerability. Ensure livelihood is protected because the income levels and social status could play a role in the eventual impact faced by the community. Poor people will always face a much bigger impact. Ensure so there is equitable distribution of wealth, better employment and livelihood opportunities as well. Ensure there is alternate sources of income, because what if because of a disaster fishermen and farmers lose their livelihood entirely? One flood can wipe out all the standing crops. One tsunami or cyclone can destroy the fishing communities for years together. So, how will you help them cope with the impact? You have to ensure they have alternate livelihoods and minimize the overall exposure of that region and the people to the impact of the disaster. So this requires planning, this requires preparedness, and this is part of disaster management. So, by containing the hazard, vulnerability, and exposure, you can limit the disaster risk. This is the entire concept of disaster risk reduction. Now, the article is examining where does India stand when it comes to disaster risk reduction? What have we done? This article mainly focuses on the financial aspect of disaster risk reduction. Because to contain a hazard, to mitigate the impact of a disaster, to reduce vulnerability and exposure, it requires a lot of investments. It requires a lot of money. So the financial allocation, the budgetary allocation is everything when it comes to disaster management and disaster risk reduction. So the writer points out the financial allocation that we see in India, which has been provided by the 15th Finance Commission in 2021. The 15th Finance Commission laid out a financial roadmap for 5 years from 2021 to 2026. And during this 5 year period, the 15th Finance Commission has provided for a dedicated funding of $30 billion, almost 2.28 lakh crore rupees, which is meant for disaster risk reduction efforts in the country. This is the first time ever that India has made a substantial dedicated allocation focused on disaster risk reduction. So, this money which has been allocated, around 30% of it has been assigned for pre disaster phase. The remaining 70% has been assigned for during disaster and post disaster phase. See, when it comes to disaster management and the disaster management governance, it is considered to be a cyclical approach. That's why it's called a disaster management cycle. There are three basic steps, cyclical steps in disaster management. The first one is pre disaster. That is, what do you do before a disaster occurs? This is where planning, preparedness, mitigation comes in. Under pre disaster, you have planning, you have preparedness, you have mitigation. So these efforts, which have to be undertaken before a disaster can strike. Then comes during disaster. What do you do during the time of disaster? Right before the disaster occurs, or disaster has just occurred, what do you do in the immediate aftermath of it? Right? How do you provide relief to the affected people? How do you carry out the emergency response, like search and rescue operations to rescue the people who are trapped, those who are trapped in floods, those who are trapped in the debris which has collapsed following an earthquake, or where infrastructure has been decimated because of a massive cyclone? So, relief and response becomes the priority during the disaster in the immediate aftermath. Then comes the third and final step, post disaster. What do you do in the long term after a disaster? After a few days has passed, few weeks has passed, what do you do for the next few months, next few years, next few decades? Because priority is to bring that region back to normalcy. Each disaster can wipe out years of progress and development. So how will you bring back normalcy, restore that normalcy by rebuilding the infrastructure and the economy of that region? How will you compensate the affected people? How will you rehabilitate them? This is the focus of post disaster management, which includes rehabilitation, reconstruction, and recovery. helping the region and the people recover from the impact of a deadly disaster. This is post disaster management. Now, this operates like a cycle. These steps come one after the other, right? And it's a continuous cycle. That's why disaster management governance today has become part of mainstream governance and administration. So, according to the priorities, Finance Commission has made different allocation for each stage. 30% for pre-disaster, under which 10% for preparedness and capacity building, 20% for mitigation efforts. So preparedness includes planning, hazard mapping, understanding a disaster, understanding the risk and vulnerability profile of a region, which requires research. Building capacity involves training, creating awareness. Whereas mitigation would include actual measures which are undertaken to reduce the impact of a disaster. For example, building cyclone shelters, or let's say creating embankments and retention walls to contain floods and prevent landslides, strengthening the slope to prevent a landslide, constantly monitoring glacial lakes which are at risk, or putting up early warning systems, forecasting systems to give out real time alerts. All these are steps under mitigation, which requires more funding. So 20% for mitigation. The rest, which has been assigned to during disaster and post disaster, it has been further divided into 40% for response. Because during disaster, there will be an immediate need for a lot of expenditure. You need well-trained professional specialist forces like India's NDRF, National Disaster Response Force, and the state disaster response forces, along with the armed forces of the country. And if required, even the central armed police forces and the state police forces as well, if necessary. You need a quick response, effective response. You need to train them, give them the right resources and equipment, right? You need to deploy the right platforms, from helicopters to, let's say, boats. You need all kinds of equipment, drones as well, which helps in disaster rescue and management services. Then comes reconstruction efforts, where 30% of the allocation has been provided for the long term recovery, for long term rehabilitation and reconstruction efforts. So, this is how the financial allocation has been provided. Now, the Finance Commission identified 5 priority challenges which had to be addressed. Evaluating the scale and prioritizing India's multi hazard challenge, because India is a multi hazard country. India is affected by multiple hazards, from earthquakes to forest fires to landslides to cyclones to tsunamis. So, understanding the scale of it requires substantial investments. So, this is a priority identified by the Finance Commission. Integrating scientific concepts of mitigation reconstruction into public finance. How can we integrate the scientific research that we have, the scientific understanding that we have of mitigation and reconstruction into public finance? That is, how do you provide adequate funds for these efforts? Avoiding duplication, ensure there is no overlap, there is no unnecessary wasteful expenditure. Synergizing interministerial institutional coordination, including center state relationship. Dealing with any disaster requires a lot of coordination from the national to state to district to local level. From your local Gram Panchayat, from a Gram Sabha, right till the central government, there has to be extensive coordination. There has to be seamless cooperation between them. How do you achieve this? And finally, establishing processes for light touch regulation, keeping regulations minimal. Regulation should not become a hurdle or roadblock. To ensure minimal regulations are put in place. These were the priorities that were identified by the Finance Commission when these funds were allocated for the next 5 years. Now let's see, where does India stand? India has done phenomenally well, not just in the last 5 years, but in the last 2 decades. Ever since the Disaster Management Act was enacted in 2005, since then, India has really transformed its approach towards disaster management. We have a very proactive, scientific approach focused on the disaster management cycle. India has taken several steps. Center state appraisal committees are in place to achieve center state coordination. The MHA has already approved reconstruction projects worth around 5,000 crores for the most disaster prone states like Kerala, Sikkim, Uttarakhand, Assam, etc. These are new allocations which have been made by utilizing the funds assigned by the Finance Commission. Then coming to mitigation for modernizing fire safety to deal with forest fires, industrial fires, urban fire incidents. 5,000 crores has been assigned as a mitigation fund to prioritize fire safety services and fire safety training. A volunteer force also has been created, a specialized volunteer force of 2.5 lakh volunteers known as Aap Mitra, Yuva Aap Mitra. These are local volunteers from local community who can assist during times of disaster, who can basically supplement the disaster response forces. So local youth are trained what to do, what not to do during times of disaster. These specialized volunteer forces, they can join hands with the specialist disaster response forces like NDRF and the armed forces and play a quick role and an important role during disaster management. Geospatial training labs and expanding research through NIDM, the National Institute of Disaster Management. NIDM is a specialized university which has come up under NDMA, under the Disaster Management Act. NDMA, which is the nodal authority for disaster management, manages a research institution, a scientific institution, and a university known as NIDM, National Institute of Disaster Management. So research has been prioritized. Using geospatial data for research has been prioritized. Standard course has been started covering 36 streams of disaster management for public servants and civil servants, right from IAS officers to a local panchayat official. They are being trained through these courses run by NIDM. NIDM has come out with these various modular courses where civil servants can undergo training. Then apart from this, projects worth $1.2 billion has been approved in the last 2 years. In just the last 12 months, a lot of funding has been channeled towards these efforts. Nature-based solutions are being promoted. The natural buffers which are being created, they are being funded. Protection of mangrove cover, protection of the coastal green cover, and using natural vegetation and bioremediation techniques to deal with disasters has been promoted. For example, the slope which is prone to landslide can be strengthened through afforestation measures. By promoting afforestation in hilly mountainous areas, particularly in Himalayas, you can limit the possibility of a landslide. By protecting mangrove cover in a coastal area, you can minimize the impact of tsunamis and cyclones. So such efforts have been taken up because we've already seen the success of such initiatives. In the past, we have implemented National Cyclone Mitigation Program from 2011 to 2022, through which we have created a real-time early warning, alert, and forecasting system. We have created cyclone shelters all across the coastline of India where the people can be safely evacuated. The standard protocols are implemented. Regular mock exercises are also conducted. So the National Cyclone Mitigation Program has been a tremendous success. That's how we have managed to bring down the impact of a cyclone. Now look at the 1999 super cyclone which hit Odisha. More than 10,000 people, thousands of them were killed. But today, a cyclone of even more severe intensity will result in death rate of hardly in single digits or double digits. Look at the progress that we have made. Look at the lives we are able to save. It's because of these mitigation programs. So through the National Cyclone Mitigation Program, India successfully put in place the early warning systems, built cyclone shelters, created embankments. That is something we are trying to replicate with the additional allocation of $1.2 billion to focus on different hazards and disasters, to promote nature-based solutions, to create natural buffers. So today, NDMA is working with state level authorities, city corporations, municipal bodies, and panchayats, and the district level bodies to revitalize our disaster management efforts. From focusing on rejuvenating urban lakes to tackle urban floods, to strengthening slopes to prevent landslides, constantly monitoring glacial lakes which are at highest risk to deal with a GLOF event, improving weather forecasting for extreme weather events with IMD, India Meteorological Department, to deal with heavy rainfall or heat wave, drought conditions, and even flood conditions. So all these initiatives and efforts are being put in place. Today, there is an advanced early warning system in India with a multimedia common alerting protocol. I'm sure many of you would be receiving messages on your mobile phone You not only get a regular text message, you get a push notification as well if there is an impending disaster. You get updates on social media, right? Through every modes of communication. Today, NDMA is communicating the alerts in real time to the affected region and the concerned population. Standard SOPs have been put in place. Training awareness has been promoted. A lot of mock exercises are also carried out regularly in the most hazard prone regions. So this is how India is able to perform much better when it comes to disaster management and disaster risk reduction. And we have taken our efforts global as well. Today, India is giving leadership at the global platforms, at G20, at BIMSTEC, at Indian Ocean Rim Association, at Shanghai Cooperation Organization, even SARC. India is a leader in disaster management, and we provide HADR services as part of our diplomatic efforts, as part of international cooperation, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief. India provides assistance to disaster prone countries. We help in search and rescue operations of other countries when they are hit by disasters. Look at the earthquake in Turkey a couple of years ago, recent earthquakes in Myanmar and Thailand, or disasters in Nepal, disasters in East Africa. India is always ready to help friendly nations by dispatching HADR assistance, humanitarian assistance, and disaster relief. India has even founded an initiative, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, the CDRI, which is a pet project of Prime Minister Modi, to promote the creation of disaster resilient infrastructure, to ensure our public infrastructure, even private infrastructure, can withstand the impact of disasters in the future. So, this basically tells you the progress the country has made when it comes to disaster risk reduction. So, it's been a very comprehensive, holistic discussion that we have had. So, please use these points to write an answer for this question. The question is fairly simple, but it all depends on how you structure your answer. Now, moving on, we have another important article. The article is focused on ADR, alternate dispute resolution. What is alternate dispute resolution? Why is it necessary? Let's understand this. Now, if you look at India's judiciary, at the Supreme Court, around 81,000 cases are pending. If you think this number is huge, wait till I give you the numbers for high courts and lower courts. At high courts, almost 62 lakh cases are pending. At lower courts, millions. In total, according to the India Justice Report 2025, 4.5 crore cases are pending in our country. This is just a rough initial estimate. The actual number could be above 5 crore. Millions of cases are pending, which means justice is getting delayed. As you know, delayed justice is as good as denied justice. So at lower courts, there is a massive problem. They don't have enough judges. A lot of vacancies are left behind. At lower courts, almost 21% of the vacancies are unfilled. At higher courts, nearly 33% of vacancies are unfilled. And each judge, especially at high courts, they are handling on an average 4,000 cases. In states like Kerala, Uttar Pradesh, the burden on the judges is so much that each judge is roughly handling 4,000 cases. That's the pending cases in front of a single judge. So you can imagine the gravity of the problem here. So the pendency of cases, it basically results in derailment of justice, denial of justice. So this is where alternate dispute resolution could become a panacea. It could become a solution for dealing with case pendency. See, the National Judicial Data Grid, it's a real-time database which is maintained. This gives you a track of all the pending cases in real time, the National Judicial Data Grid. So the data from India Justice Report is based on it. India Justice Report collates data from the National Judicial Data Grid, and that's how we know there are roughly 4.5 crore pending cases. We even know the distribution at Supreme Court, High Court, and lower courts. So what can be done? What is the solution? The solution lies in alternate form of dispute resolution. This includes methods such as arbitration, mediation, conciliation. These are the popular forms of alternate dispute settlement, which essentially focuses on striking a compromise between the parties involved in a case. Now, see, when you file a litigation at a court, when you file a suit, it essentially turns into a hostile battle, right, between the accused and the ones who are making the accusation. Usually, a court trial is a hostile way of dealing with a dispute, dealing with a litigation, and there is always a possibility of that case dragging for months and years together. In alternate dispute resolution, the focus is not on deciding who wins the case. It's about ensuring that justice is done to every party in a fair manner and striking a compromise, a mutually acceptable compromise through the process of arbitration, mediation, and conciliation. This takes much lesser time. It can be more effective. It can actually prevent cases reaching the courts itself. So before some litigations reach the level of the court, what if you resolve them through alternate methods? Right? So that is the approach of alternate dispute resolution. And there is a constitutional and legal basis for this. Under the Indian Constitution, we have Article 39A, which mandates the state. It's a DPSP, it's a Directive Principle of State Policy, where the state is mandated to secure equal justice and free legal aid to the citizens. It is a duty of the state under this DPSP, Article 39A, to secure equal justice and free legal aid. It was basically added through the 42nd Amendment Act. Now, we have a law which has been passed in this regard, the Arbitration and Conciliation Act. The Arbitration and Conciliation Act was brought out in 1996 and recently it was amended in 2021. It provides the statutory basis for arbitration and conciliation. Then we also have the Legal Services Act, under which NALSA, the National Legal Services Authority, and similar state level legal services authority has been set up, through which the most popular and important form of alternate dispute resolution is carried out, which is your Lok Adalat. Lok Adalat, which started out as a practice from 1999, has become widely popular. It has become an effective way of resolving cases and striking a compromise before the case can reach the doorstep of courts. Lok Adalats have done very, very well in resolving few civil related cases, even some cases with a criminal angle. Those cases where criminal liabilities are present or civil offenses are carried out, they are easily resolved through Lok Adalat, where alternate dispute resolution, the compromise mode, arbitration, conciliation, mediation is promoted. Now, these rulings which are given out, right? These awards which are given out, you can't call it a ruling. Ruling comes from a court. But when it comes to alternate dispute resolution, it's the awards which are given. These awards are made binding. But of course, there is an option to appeal. Eventually, the litigants, if they're not happy with the arbitration process, with the mediation process, they can go on appeal and approach the courts. But when the award is made final, it ensures that there is some element of authority as well to alternate dispute resolution. So this, according to the article, is a solution for India to deal with the pendency of cases. So along with alternate dispute resolution, if we can leverage technology, if we can bring in better technology for case management, using virtual court hearings, bringing in artificial intelligence to better manage the case load and to distribute the case load, and filling the vacancies in the judiciary. These are the basic steps for India to deal with the massive pendency of cases. One is alternate dispute resolution, second is better usage of technology, and third is filling up the vacancies. If these steps can be undertaken, then we can try to bring down the caseload maybe in the coming decades. So that's what we learned from this important article. Now let's move towards the smaller articles in the paper today, and we can wrap up the discussion very soon. Since we were talking about India providing HADR assistance to other countries, there are two related developments which are mentioned in today's paper. Our Himalayan neighbors, Nepal and Bhutan, both of them have unfortunately been hit by a massive disaster. You might have read news reports coming from West Bengal as well, where many people have been killed. Large scale floods, landslides have occurred. Right? This has been the story across different parts of India. We saw this first towards northwestern parts of India, Himachal Pradesh, Punjab, Jammu and Kashmir, Uttarakhand. Now West Bengal as well, because of the abnormal monsoon activity in the Bay of Bengal. Now the heavy rain which has affected Nepal and Bhutan has also caused deadly floods and landslides. Lives have been lost, infrastructure has been uprooted, and both countries are now being assisted by India. Prime Minister Modi has said that India is the first responder in the region. Now, I want you to understand this concept of India being the first responder. See, under the neighborhood first policy of India and the Mahasagar doctrine of India, India projects itself as the first responder in our immediate neighborhood. Meaning, we want to be the first one to provide security. We want to be the first one to offer net security, be it a security crisis or a economic crisis or a disaster. India wants to be the first power in the region to reach out to the neighborhood, from Mauritius to Maldives, to Nepal to Bhutan to Myanmar to Bangladesh. We want to be the first country in our neighborhood to assist our immediate neighbors and our extended neighbors, so that this establishes India's role. It establishes India's humanitarian role and retains our influence as the leading power of the Indo-Pacific, right? So Indian Army has assisted the Royal Bhutan Army in conducting a search and rescue operation to save people who are trapped. Then in Nepal as well, India has dispatched medical aid and other humanitarian assistance to provide some relief to Nepal, which has also been very badly affected. So you can use these examples as case studies when you're writing answers in disaster management. Next, topic related to internal security. CRPF, which is the primary anti-Naxal force of India, the Central Reserve Police Force, which is one of the central armed police forces under the Ministry of Home Affairs. It has given out 10,000 radio sets to the people of Bastar region in Chhattisgarh. Bastar is the hotbed of Naxal activity, one of the last remnants of the Naxal stronghold in the country. India is right now marching towards the goal of achieving a Naxal Mukt Bharat by March 2026. This is the stated goal of the Prime Minister and the Home Minister. Recently, Indian forces have seen tremendous success against the Naxal leadership, with top Naxal leaders being eliminated and Naxal strongholds being decimated. So Naxals are surrendering in large numbers. We are on the brink of almost winning this ideological battle against left-wing extremist Maoist movement. So to defeat a strong ideology like Maoism, you need to wage the narrative war as well. Because Maoists or Naxals, they are masters of propaganda. They know how to control the narrative. They know how to exploit the anger and resentment against the state and turn that into disaffection and radicalism and insurgency. So to prevent that, it's important to de-radicalize the local population, provide them the right messages, bring them into the mainstream, establish a better communication with them. And for that, you have to shape the narrative. The government has to lead the effort to shape that narrative. So by distributing 10,000 radio sets to the tribal belt in Bastar region, the government is hoping to reach out to those people directly through radio communication, through radio programs which are educational, which are entertainment based, or even Prime Minister's Man Ki Baat address. They can deliver the much needed support for the local communities. It could provide educational information for tribal youth. It could actually help tribal farmers as well, right? It could carry messages of awareness for tribal women and the tribal population, which could create livelihood opportunities for them. So this is an effort to bring the tribal belt into the mainstream in the Bastar region in order to counter the Naxal propaganda and the Naxal narrative. So this completes my discussion of all the mains and prelims oriented articles. Now we will focus only on the small prelims related articles. India and Britain have started their naval exercise Konkan. The Konkan is the name of the joint military exercise between Indian Navy and the Royal British Navy. This exercise was started in the year 2004. Since then, it has been going on continuously. It's a biennial exercise held once in 2 years. This cements the military relationship between India and Britain. Today, Britain is looking to play a bigger role in the Indo Pacific. It's increasing its naval engagement. In fact, the British Navy has sent out a carrier strike group that is led by an aircraft carrier and an entire fleet of ships and submarines. They have been sent out on Operation High Mast, where this British carrier strike group is visiting multiple friendly countries and building naval engagement with them. So, under Operation High Mast, which is a British naval mission, it is reaching out to multiple countries, including India, to build stronger maritime security relations. So, as part of this effort, an Indian carrier strike group from the Indian Navy has participated with the British carrier strike group under the bilateral naval exercise Konkan, which builds interoperability between our naval forces. Next, related to Indian Navy again, Indian Navy has inducted another important vessel, INS Androth. Just note down the fact, this is the second anti-submarine warfare vessel, which is a shallow water craft which can operate in shallow waters to track and identify enemy submarines and launch precision strikes against enemy submarines. India is building up its anti submarine warfare capability. We have multiple destroyers and frigates with specialist anti submarine warfare suites. We have special maritime reconnaissance capabilities through the P-8 Poseidon aircraft that we have got from the US and the MH-60 Romeo helicopters that we have got from the US, which are known as submarine hunters, submarine killers. They have unique equipment to carry out maritime reconnaissance, aerial reconnaissance, and pick up enemy submarines and launch precision strikes against them. So, Indian Navy is also procuring shallow watercrafts which can navigate in shallow waters to look out for enemy submarines which might approach our coastline. So, this is the second such vessel which has been inducted, and it's an indigenously built vessel built by GRSE, the Garden Reach shipbuilders and engineers based out of Kolkata. So this adds to the modernization of Indian Navy. In the last few months itself, several new vessels have been inducted, and INS Androth is the latest one. Next, the Cairo Agreement is in news. UPSC might ask you in prelims, what is the Cairo Agreement? What is it related to? Cairo Agreement is between Iran and International Atomic Energy Agency. The Iran, which is accused of building a secret nuclear weapons program, which was recently targeted by Israeli and American airstrikes, it had refused to follow the nuclear deal, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, also called the Iran Nuclear Deal, that was worked out in 2014. So, under the nuclear deal, Iran was supposed to be cooperating with IAEA, allowing IAEA inspections at its nuclear facilities. In return, the sanctions on Iran had been lifted. But since US quit the nuclear deal under Donald Trump in 2018 and US brought back sanctions on Iran, hostility has been rising between them. Now, with the crisis in West Asia and the war between Israel and Iran, the crisis has escalated. So, Iran has basically walked out of this deal, meaning it's not following the terms of the deal. It has started enriching uranium. That's the prime reason why Israel and US carried out the airstrikes. And especially after the airstrikes, Iran was not willing to follow the terms of the nuclear deal. So, with the mediation of European powers, which are also part of the nuclear agreement, that is Britain, United Kingdom, France, European Union, Germany. These European powers, mediated with Iran and IAEA, they had negotiated the Cairo Agreement recently, under which Iran had accepted that it will remain committed to IAEA guidelines and allow for inspection by this nuclear watchdog. Because see, International Atomic Energy Agency, it is headquartered in Vienna, in Austria. It's the global nuclear watchdog. It reports both to UN General Assembly and your UN Security Council. It ensures that nuclear proliferation is tackled. It promotes safety and security of nuclear technology and programs around the world. And it can inspect nuclear facilities when countries have signed the Safeguards Agreement. So Iran had committed under the Cairo Agreement recently to follow the guidelines and the protocols of IAEA, but provided if the sanctions are lifted. This was the deal between them. But European countries have brought back the sanctions recently. UK, France especially, they have brought the sanctions back on Iran, which is violation of the nuclear deal itself. So Iran has said we will not follow the terms of the Cairo Agreement. Just know what is the Cairo Agreement, what is it related to. Next, the Coral Triangle is in the news. Very, very important topic for prelims. The reason why it is in news is because in Philippines, researchers have developed a way to cryobank, cryo-freeze coral larvae. As you know, coral structures are the lifeline of the biodiversity of the marine ecosystems. So the coral ecosystems, which are threatened by climate change and global warming and rising temperatures, they need to be preserved. So researchers in Philippines have pioneered this technique where they can freeze the coral larvae. Later, they can thaw it using laser. So they have figured out this method to freeze coral larvae using liquid nitrogen. Using liquid nitrogen at minus 196 degrees Celsius, they figured out a way to freeze coral larvae to preserve it. And later they can be reused by thawing the cryo-stored coral larvae using lasers. So this is a technology which has been pioneered, which can help in conservation of coral reefs. That's why the topic is in news. So what is this coral triangle? Where is it located? Please look at the map. The coral triangle is even considered as the Amazon of the seas. Just like you have the Amazon forest in South America, which is rich with biodiversity. Similarly, there is a very rich biodiverse area which expands and basically spreads over the Southeast and East Asia and the Pacific region. It covers the stretch of Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. This entire stretch is said to have one of the richest coral reefs in the world. The expanse, it stretches around 5.6 million square kilometers. So this region is called the Coral Triangle. Coming to the last topic for today, there is a scientific term in news. Xenobiology. What is xenobiology? It is a new upcoming branch of science. So UPSC might ask you, what is xenobiology? What does it deal with? This new branch of science which is coming up, it basically deals with alternate life forms which can come up in other celestial bodies. See, right now, our understanding of life is limited to life on Earth, right? Be it the DNA sequence that all the organisms have, the way of reproduction, death, decomposition. This is our limited biological understanding. This is how we think life is. But alien life, if at all it exists, might be in a very different form, something we can't even contemplate, something we can't even imagine. So it need not be what is shown in your movies, in sci-fi movies, right? So to possibly try and predict and understand what kind of life might exist in other worlds, in other celestial bodies, in other planets, there is a new branch of science which is coming up called xenobiology. It's basically Greek for study of alien life. To understand different biological processes which can give rise to a living organism. Understood? So this emerging domain in the field of biology is called xenobiology. So on this note, I bring my discussion to an end. We have covered all the topics as comprehensively as possible. If you have liked the session, understood everything, do support us with your likes and comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. Thanks for watching.